Well, good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Hill Country. I'm Justin. I am the Zoom host and service associate today. We're going to be having Linda and Vicki speaking with us today. We're glad everyone could join us. Don't see any new visitors today. Looks like I recognize everybody. And we're glad you could all join us today. I believe Vicki is going to start us off with some opening words.
I do. I have a poem by Mary Oliver to share with you. It's poem 133, and it's called The Summer Day. It's a famous poem, so you probably all actually know it. Anyway, here it is, The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass and who is eating sugar out of my hand, who's moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who's gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields. This is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Justin?
Thank you. All right, and we're going to go on to announcements. Linda has an announcement for everyone first.
First of all, I want to thank Vicki for helping me today. This is the middle of cedar season. I'm hoarse and coughing. So she's not only helping me with reading through the service, but reading part of the service. So thank you, Vicki. The other thing I want to announce is this has been a horrendous week. We all know that. We've all seen things we never expected to see. But rather than dwell on that in our joys and concerns, let's share our joys and concerns that we have had normally. And we will have a special time of sharing after the service while we're still in fellowship, but outside our church forum. So those of you who want to share your feelings about this week, we will do that after the service. Thank you.
Are there any other announcements? Kevin, 1 second, let me get your microphone on there.
Well, Tuesday at 7, there'll be a U-Bar-U Zoom presentation of U-Bar-U event on a done by a Texas archaeological steward that Carolyn knows all about these people and took part in the visit by these people to U-Bar-U. And so this is a really wonderful presentation. I believe I've seen most of that already. And it's directly relevant to U-Bar-U because the people there, and Susan put this in the reminder, probably went to U-Bar-U for seasonal hunting and church harvesting. So it's really an excellent deal, and I invite people to attend.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Carolyn, just a moment. Let me get your microphone on.
Play music, Kevin.
Hold on a second. Okay.
So Tuesday, 7 p.m., and you have to go to the ubaru.org website under e-events, and then click on the registration link ahead of time, and then you get the invite to the meeting in particular.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
What?
What's the event?
Oh, the U-Bar-U event.
What is it? Well, I mean,
He already told us that.
Yeah.
He'll have to tell you later.
All right.
Light the chalice.
Yep, we'll be lighting our chalice now. Excuse me. The flaming chalice is a symbol of Unitarian Universalism. It is as an everlasting flame for this community. It offers its warmth to those who are cold. It provides light to those who would see. It purifies and transforms this sanctuary into sacred space, this congregation into sacred community. May its flame burn true and high and strong. And now we will go on to the mission statement and affirmation. We journey together, guided by UU values to seek, nurture, and serve our loving church family, our community, and our world. The doctrine of this church is love. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. And this is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity and fellowship, as we strive to have all souls grow into harmony with the divine. And now we'll be having our hymn, Spirit of Life. Give me one moment to get that queued up here.
Joy is perfect, Janet, because if you watch the cardinals in the snow today, that could actually be a spiritual practice. What is a spiritual practice? What's a spiritual service? As a UU on the Sunday Service Committee, a subcommittee of our spiritual development, having worked with our UU ministers and with the congregation, we often encounter requests for more spiritual services. What we find is that spiritual means many different things to UUs. Heck, religion means many different things to UUs, and there are some still debating whether we are actually a religion. Let me start today with some definitions. Religion is a social cultural system of designated behaviors and practices, morals, worldviews, texts, sanctified places, ethics, or organizations that relate humanity to supernatural, transcendental, or spiritual elements. I would conclude we were a religion, but not religion in the traditional sense known to the majority. Spirituality is a name given to matters of the spirit. That can be any kind of meaningful personal activity or peaceful experience. Some people believe spirituality is a part of religion. Others who are not religious still seek and have spiritual experiences. Spirituality includes your spiritual practices or spiritual disciplines, which may include prayer, meditation, chanting, breathing exercises, and ceremonial rituals. Spiritually and your spiritual life also include your daily interactions with people. Given all these definitions, where do we find ourselves with spirituality, spiritual practice, and a spiritual service?
Okay, first, let's look at intentional spiritual practices like meditation or yoga. I'm sure many of you are familiar with these and probably use them as part of your life. There's a UU minister, Reverend Darcy Lane, who's addresses those practices that you have to do daily and incorporate into your life. And she says this: I studied music for more than 16 years. I argued with my mom about quitting. However, my mom believed that there were benefits to studying music beyond the music itself. Gradually, it dawned on me that if you practice a piece without beauty, without tone, without feeling, that's how you perform. If we practice joylessly, the music we make will be joyless. She goes on to say that she finally realized that you just have to practice goofing around, improvising spontaneously, and making silly sounds if we want joy and creativity in our music. She learned in practicing to let go of her concern about mistakes and now finds her music a spiritual practice. Reverend Lane believes this concept also applies to some other spiritual practices like meditation, believing it's no different than any other kinds of spiritual practice. She believes that meditation is just like any other kind of practice. Some days it just doesn't gel. If we keep at it, it will come to us, just like her music did. Our expectations and lack of patience gets in the way. The satirical paper, The Onion, once had this funny headline about meditation. This is the headline. Man who downloaded $2.99 meditation app prepares to enter the lotus plane of eternal serenity. This same principle applies to yoga. Remember to embrace something with fun and joy to ultimately achieve that lotus plane on some level. And always remember that meditation or yoga isn't temperamentally or even developmentally appropriate to everybody. There's so many ways that we have spiritual practice in our lives as you use. Even if you don't practice yoga or meditation or perhaps the ukulele, you are practicing something. You already have a spiritual practice right now, whether you think about it that way or not. The question is, what is it that you're practicing? Have you shown kindness or shared warm smiles 20,000 times? Some folks notice the natural world around them, like the cardinals in the snow, or on their daily run or walk, or watch the slow growth of a tree through the kitchen window while they sip their coffee. Every life is filled with repetition. All those thousands of repetitions of simple things, when taken together, have power. Like drops of water that wear away a stone, we're shaping ourselves every moment with the simple repetition of our lives.
UU minister Reverend Sharon Wiley also speaks of spiritual practices, and she emphasizes attending church on Sunday is a spiritual practice. I will summarize her thoughts on spiritual practice. She was passionate on social justice when she was in college, protesting, marching, and attending campaign rallies. She was exhausted mentally from justice work when she finally finished college and retreated from those activities. 10 years later, she joined a UU church and began to be involved with social justice issues bigger than just her own life. She felt invigorated and her passion returned. What was different? In religious community, her gathering began with a candle lighting or a reading or a prayer. Before them, they marched for peace. It did not just feel good to take action, it felt nourishing. Reverend Wiley goes further. As I look back, I see the difference in my spiritual practice of going to church regularly and being in community. There are many different criteria used to define spiritual practice, but here is mine. An activity whose primary purpose is to quiet the mind and being, excuse me, this is why Vicki's helping me, and bring us into deeper connection with the independent web of all existence. Let me repeat that. An activity whose primary purpose is to quiet the mind and bring us into deeper connection with the interdependent web of all existence. Spiritual practice is intentional, can be performed daily, and is non-productive in terms of oneself.
Many adults seek spiritual experiences and practices that will ground and center them in their day-to-day lives. Some people are just beginning to explore spirituality. Others have deep and long-standing spiritual practices, spiritual habits. Some find themselves with small amounts of time, and others long to set aside time for some kind of focused activity. Another UU minister, Judy Brown, gives us tips on how to do this every day, and here are some of her thoughts. This is from a poem that she wrote called Fire. What makes a fire burn is the space between the logs, a breathing space. We feel spiritual when we feel a deep connection with something greater than ourselves, with the natural world, with those who have gone before, with a creative spirit, maybe with God. Spiritual moments like this, quote, direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder are an important source of religious learning for us Unitarian Universalists. Sometimes these moments catch us by surprise. A sunset takes our breath away. We share a moment of connection with a stranger. We discover a creative insight. One of the ways to nurture spirituality is to allow space between the logs of our life, taking time to pause and notice rather than rushing around from one must-do activity to the next. And here are some ways to think about that. And I know you'll think of many more.
When outdoors, attend to the sounds, the smells, and sights that surround you. Take in the stars, the clouds, the new growth of a tree, the smell of night air. Before beginning a meeting or a meal, stop to light a candle or a chalice and share meaningful words or a prayer if you're comfortable with that. Find space in your heart or your home for precious symbols and stories of your ancestors, stories that give you courage or a firm connection or echo their love. Before entering a difficult conversation, stop and hold the others involved in thought or in prayer, wishing for their well-being as well as your own. Take time to learn about the human body, about dinosaurs or bumblebees, about tiny atoms, and visit galaxies. Take in the wonder of all that we know and that humans have yet to discover about our world and the universe.
When you're in traffic, I like this one. When you're in traffic, maybe at a stoplight or even out and about on the streets, remember the humanity of every other person in the same space. Remember that each one has a story. You may not want to know what that story is, but everybody has a story. Many people have a regular spiritual practice, such as prayer, meditation, yoga, mindful walking, journaling, or even keeping track and expressing gratitude. Regular practice keeps us open and connected to whatever that something is that is larger than ourselves. Other regular practices like making music, hiking, creative work can also be spiritual practices if done with intention and attention. Intention and attention. Being part of a small group ministry or a 12-step program can be a spiritual practice. So too is a regular attendance at worship or with a Unitarian Universalist church without walls that allows you to find spiritual community wherever you are. Find out what spiritual practice works for you, or consider that you might have a spiritual practice you didn't call by that name. How about choirs, meditation groups, knitting groups, bike riding, or walking on a river trail, kayaking, yoga, horseback riding? I'll vote for that one. Even volunteering when it sets your mind free and in thought about others. Given Reverend Brown's advice, we have many spiritual practices. Some examples from our own congregation. Pat Kobe and June Hartley, when they work with students from Families in Literacy and immigrants in San Antonio. Kevin Hartley on his solitary hiking in the beautiful parts of our country. David Gross, bike riding on the River Trail. Carolyn Dreyer, volunteering with Freeman Fritz and Kirk Connect. Jill Wiggins with her long walks with her dog, Junior. Mike and Karen Burkett have their volunteer work with Kirk Connect. Donna Schloss has volunteer work with the Raphael Clinic. Mari Brown and her colleagues in the small ministry group. Donnie Bunch with his love and practice of astronomy, and Meredith playing on that grand piano at her house just for the joy of music. These are all forms of spiritual practice. And this brings us to spiritual services. We have many rituals in our service: the chalice lighting, the opening words, the extinguishing of the chalice, singing, sometimes a flower communion or our burning bowl ceremony at the end of the year, sharing our covenant, and even our annual animal blessing. Even when we have a speaker other than a minister, the organization work usually, we try very hard to make it always align with one or more of our 7 principles. For example, when our speaker from Families and Literacy aligned with our principle regarding the inherent worth of all beings. Our UGRA speaker helped us learn more about our river and aligned with the principle of our interdependent web and spoke to our nature lovers and lovers of our river.
I would conclude that spiritual practice abounds among us and in our Sunday services. Think about your spiritual practices differently when you go about your daily lives and in our Sunday services, and embrace them. Keep a space between the logs for spiritual practices and recognize the spirituality of our Sunday services. And now we have comments, questions.
All right. Okay, if you've got anything, let's go ahead and give me a wave or send me a message in the chat. Okay, David, just a second there.
I think I just unmuted.
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Very interesting and important, I think. I just wanted to share. I should have done it shared it as a joy, perhaps, but now I'll share it as a spiritual practice moment. And that is yesterday on the river trail, on my bike. I was biking along, and I saw something in front of me ways down the trail, and I thought, is that a cat? What is that? And then it came trotting toward me and kept coming toward me, and I was going toward it, and it turned out to be a fox, a little gray fox. And he looked at me. He almost got right to me, and he looked at me, and then calmly stepped aside to the side of the trail. And that was, I mean,
Yeah, really.
it made my day. It was the most, just a beautiful moment. And I think this, to describe it as spiritual, is completely accurate and appropriate.
Agree.
All right, Kevin, let me get you on there.
Well, I have a bit of a spiritual practice. I still have some of my father's ashes. So when I've been on hikes, or places that I think are particularly interesting, maybe I get to a high peak or the Colorado River and the Grand Canyon, and then I will out loud be talking to my father and my deceased younger brother about how I would have loved to have been doing this hike with them, and my mother also, and talking to them about how I miss them. And so I've scattered my father's ashes must have been 30 times so far.
Oh, wonderful.
All right, and Pat, let me get you on there.
Well, I would say that my experience in this deep cloud on the earth while at the Corpus Christi State Park campground was about the strongest spiritual experience I have recently had. I have been in fog before, but never so fully enveloped by it that everything around me was soaking wet. I had thought it rained. And Dave said, no, Pat, this is a fog cloud on the earth. And he's more familiar with the weather near the coast. We were 70 miles from the coast, actually, but in that direction. Also, I'm going to speak to the cardinals, the red cardinals. Corpus Christi State Park has a bird blind that I did visit, and I saw cardinals in that bird blind that were the size of crows. I have never, ever seen such huge, beautiful red cardinals feeding or anywhere. Anyway, okay,
Thank you.
that's my speech.
All right. And let me get Janet. Go ahead.
In the spiritual journey of my life, I started out Catholic and went unchurched for a very long time after I left the Catholic Church. When I found UU, I discovered I had a terrible time reconciling my core beliefs to the practice of prayer because I didn't really believe that there was a persona out there listening, particularly for the kind of prayer that is a request, please let me get that promotion, or please help my sister's child become more healthy. Partly because I feel like so many of those prayers go unanswered, that if there is somebody listening, I don't like that person because the level of cruelty involved in ignoring those requests is more than I can stomach for a divine being of any kind. It took a while, but what I discovered for myself personally is that there is one prayer that feels right to me, because it almost doesn't matter if there is anyone listening. And that is the attitude of gratitude. So for me, that is the first, best, and only prayer, is gratitude.
All right. Vicki, go ahead, and then I'll get to Don.
Janet, I don't know if, I'm sure you've heard this before, that there used to be a joke that a Unitarian prayer begins, to whom it may concern, right? And I just wanted to mention that over the past 3 years or so, learning to live a life without a partner of 40 years and trying to process grief, the practice that I found really helpful was something called morning pages. And I don't know if anybody else has ever done this, but the idea is that if you journal or write thoughts or impressions or just how your body feels, but the act of writing as soon as you can after you wake up is a link to your subconscious, and that those thoughts are closer to what's really going on inside you. And even just a paragraph or two written as soon as you can after you wake up, morning pages, was really helpful to me in processing grief and in designing a new life. Anyway, it's been a spiritual practice that I've used a lot.
All right. Don, you should have a thing there. Go ahead.
Okay. Following on with the idea of prayer, Meister Eckhart, who was a mystic from the Middle Ages, in his writings, he states that the only prayer we ever need is thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, Linda, go ahead.
You know, our friend Catherine, I can't remember her last name, our friend who donated U to the UUs and our parsonage to our church, told me once that she viewed prayer as the highest form of our thoughts. And I thought that was a very, it really gelled with me that it is the highest form of our thoughts. It's when I'm grateful or even when I'm upset, it channels you into a higher form of thought.
Mhm.
Right. Oh, go ahead, Vicki.
I think the other really important part of this sermon, which by the way, Linda composed, is this idea of the logs of our life, the fact that there are so many things we do every day, that there is a repetition of these actions. And if we do them with an intention and attention, if we watch what we're doing when we have our first cup of coffee, and we do that every morning, that can be a spiritual practice. It doesn't have to be something outside the regular activities of daily life. The difference is that you pay attention to it and that you do it with the intention of focusing on it. That's all it really means, is how does that coffee taste? What does the cup feel like? It's really a way of getting you into the moment and getting you out of your head and into your body. I think that's a really important discovery that we can all share and rediscover. You know, think about the things you do every single day. I take my dogs outside every day. If I pay attention to that, that could be a spiritual practice because I'm certainly connecting with a creature that's outside my existence, just like David had that moment with the fox. Anyway, I thought that was a really interesting part of the sermon that Linda wrote. And I thank you for that, Linda. It was good for me.
Thank you. June has something. Let me get you on there.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with the idea of attitudes of gratitude, which I truly try to practice. And then, like several other people have said, just to be aware, not to drift through the day, but to be aware of the many moments of magic that happen when we pay attention.
Mhm.
Daily. I do when I wake up. I think of it as a meditation. I do exercises for about 15 minutes, and they're the same exercises every day. I do deep breathing in between them, and part of them has evolved into something that it's kind of funny to me, but I pay attention to my feet, and I thank them for being mostly painless, 99% painless, and for carrying me on the path that I'm going to be following that day and the path that has brought me to where I am. And sometimes I'll rub them a little bit and just thanking my feet. And I've never taken the time to do that and to be truly grateful that I can walk without pain. And they're not letting me fall as often anymore either. So maybe they're answering my appreciation. Thanks. You're not getting up here, kid. No, you're too heavy.
All right. Anyone else? Pat? Give me just a second. Let me get you.
I guess I want to talk a little bit about a significant event for me that happened yesterday. I attended a Zoom funeral service yesterday that was for a man I have never met, but he was a man that my daughter-in-law, my son's widow, fell in love with after 5 years of being a widow. And she fell in love with him and became attached to him, very attached. They had already made a commitment for life, a life partner commitment, knowing that he was critically ill, but because how often do you feel that strong a connection to somebody? It was a very special attachment she had to him. Anyway, I did not know the man's religion. I learned a lot about this wonderful person that she was associated with. She was part of the service, but it was a Unitarian service, although the man had no connection to any church. And I thought, my goodness, this is the most beautiful, the most spiritual. They talked about the qualities of life that he had that were so good. And I came away from that service feeling very enriched and very grateful that I got a chance to know this person that my daughter-in-law, whom I love deeply, became connected with. Okay. It was beautiful. A funeral. Beautiful. Okay.
Thank you. All right, and David, let me get you back on there.
Two quick thoughts. One, that all this, the thing that a bunch of us have said about paying attention to the moments in our life and being aware and attentive, of course, is so similar to a lot of Asian wisdom literature. And even as it's been borrowed by Americans like Baba Ram Dass, with his famous book from the 60s with the wonderful title, Be Here Now. Be Here Now. But the other thing, totally unrelated to that I wanted to say, because no one has mentioned it, is the importance to me of ceremony and ritual in the church. And it's one of the things I miss most about being together in person at the church. And coming back to the church after 50 years of being away from any religion, one of the things that I love the most is the ceremony and ritual, the lighting of the chalice, the singing together as a congregation, and the affirmation. And we do them on Zoom, but it's not the same, of course. And I know there's a dispute within the Unitarian community about ceremony and ritual, just the way that, anyway. For me, those are really important, positive, and probably the most explicitly spiritual moments in my life. My moment with the fox is spiritual in retrospect, but at the moment I wasn't feeling, anyway. But the moments of ceremony and ritual that we share in the church are very spiritual to me and very enriching and important.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, we'll move on to our next hymn.
So in closing, let's just remember our spiritual practices with intention and attention and joy. And remember to be in connection with each other in the same way. And now we'll have, as the service closes, we'll have our sharing of feelings and
We have
actions.
to extinguish the chalice.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Extinguish the chalice.
We should do that, shouldn't
Yeah.
we?
Yes, we should do that. It's a ritual.
Yes. No. All right, and we now extinguish our chalice, but its light lives on in the minds and hearts and souls of each one of you. Carry that flame with you and share it with those you know, with those you love, and most especially with those you have yet to meet.